For the first time in 2024, MotoGP goes racing on European soil, and there's no better place to enjoy the spectacular action than the jaw-dropping Algarve International Circuit. The 19th Grand Prix of Portugal promises thrills galore in Portimao with a 12-lap Tissot sprint up next live. It's time for MotoGP. So 4.6 kilometres in length, 2.85 miles, 15 corners, 6 left, 9 of them right. And what a circuit this Algarve International Circuit is. One of the jewels in the MotoGP calendar. So much crammed into that relatively compact 4.6 kilometre layout. 15 corners which blend hard braking, slow turns, fast corners and massive undulation. That's why this circuit is known around the world as the roller coaster. Long lap penalties at turn 14. There's a long sweeping right-hander, turn 15. It brings you over the blind crest onto the start-finish straight. At the end of that start-finish straight, one of 3 heavy braking zones into turn 1. And high stress on the rear tyres through that final corner. Well, this is a flashback to 2 weeks ago. And what a show it was under the spectacular night lights at the Lusail International Circuit in Doha. This was how we kicked off our 75th anniversary season in the MotoGP World Championship, with reigning world champion Pecco Bagnaia setting his stall out early as he took the spoils in the opening Grand Prix of the new season. Tough task, isn't it, to wrestle the number 1 plate away from the dominant Italian. Well, that man on your screens there, Jorge Martin, the current Tissot Sprint King in MotoGP, as he goes in search of an 11th sprint victory here today in Portimao. Home hopes resting firmly on the shoulders of Miguel Oliveira. He made history here 3.5 years ago, back in 2020, when he was the first ever Portuguese winner of a MotoGP race. Big ask though for the home fans to be heading home happy tonight, with Oliveira starting this afternoon's upcoming Tissot sprint over 12 laps. Lights out in just over 20 minutes time here on Portugal's stunning Algarve coast. Oliveira 15th place on the grid, having not come through Q1 this morning. Welcome to this breathtaking venue. Thankfully, after a rather grey and gloomy start to proceedings here in Portimao yesterday, the sun has finally broken through the clouds, and this is the Portimao we all know and we all love. Coming up in, as we mentioned, just over 20 minutes time, the Tissot Sprint. And of course, this was where the Tissot Sprint era all began 1 year ago, as Pecco Bagnaia started the defence of his World Championship from the top step of the podium. He got the first ever gold medal and his name in the history books as the first ever winner of the Tissot Sprint. Fast forward 1 year, it's all eyes on the world champion going from 4th place on the grid. This should be a special one. Great turnout, lots of Portuguese fans have come to roar on Miguel Oliveira. Matt Burton Lewis to be in the commentary box. Simon Crayfat was always down in pit lane. And we've already had a fairly dramatic Super Saturday here in Portugal. And it's congratulations to Enea Bastianini, the factory Ducati rider, sticking his GP24 on pole position for just the 2nd time in his Premier Class career. His first pole position as a factory Ducati rider. His only other previous pole was at the Red Bull Ring in Austria in MotoGP in the middle of 2022. Not a prolific front row starter is Bastianini. That's just his 8th in the MotoGP World Championship. This is 51st start. Fair to say, Lewis, the man who we're about to see inside that Ducati Novo garage, Bastianini, the beast, has banished some demons from Portimao 1 year ago.
He's got a score to settle with this Algarve International Circuit, hasn't he? It was the Tissot Sprint here last year when Enea Bastianini's season took a dip that it took a long time to recover from. Taken out very early on by his fellow Ducati rider at that time, of course, Luca Marini, having ran as high as second early on in that Tissot sprint. Bastianini back on pole position for the first time since the summer of 2022. How good it is to see him back. It's a front row that features Jorge Martin, but I guess slightly surprising company for him on the front row of the grid, which makes this Tissot sprint very difficult to call.
This man, Maverick Vinales, has climbed off his sickbed to find himself second on the grid, second in the Grand Prix here in Portimao 1 year ago. It's been an excellent Saturday so far for the factory Aprilia rider. Vinales topped this morning's FP2 session and then got himself with a brilliant late lap of 1:37.788, which did have a significant knock-on effect when he took the checkered flag, Vinales, because it pushed Pecco Bagnaia off the front row, and it also pushed Pedro Acosta off row 2. Acosta, the rookie sensation, going from 7th place. Now then, he is the undisputed Tissot sprint king, isn't he, Jorge Martin? His victory in the season opening sprint under night lights in Qatar 2 weeks ago was his 10th. He has not finished lower than 2nd place in the last 9 sprints. You've got to go all the way back to his 5th place in the Catalunya class, which feels like an awful long time ago now, since Jorge Martin was not collecting a gold or a silver medal. 3rd place on the grid for him. He's going to be a tough challenge, as is this man coming from the head of the 2nd row, Pecco Bagnaia, who looks, Lewis, like he always does, has got great race pace.
Yeah, when you watch Pecco Bagnaia through a race weekend, you've almost got to ignore his position for much of Friday, because he just keeps his head, doesn't he? He never panics, even when he looks like he's perhaps under a little bit of pressure when it comes to making his way into Q2, because he very usually manages it, barring a couple of exceptions late last year. His race pace, as we saw in Qatar, is unmatched. His sprint pace hasn't always been the best. He hasn't necessarily specialised on a Saturday. Hasn't won a sprint since Austria last year, which was the last sprint before the Jorge Martin run began. He's won 8 of the last 10, which is why he probably comes into this as the slight favourite.
Middle of the 2nd row, leading the KTM Gas Challenge, is Jack Miller. Opened up his new airlines here this week. I knew this was coming. Right on cue. Turn 9. Look at this and marvel at the skill. Utterly brilliant. This is Jack Miller in full flow. Some big air time. We know he's got his own purpose-built motocross track in his backyard at his property in Townsville in Australia. But he's made good use of it, because now he can pretty much bunny hop a 300 horsepower MotoGP bike. 21.2 metres. That is now the world long jump record for a MotoGP bike. Will anybody dare take on Thriller Miller in that particular battle? Aside from a crash at the end of FP2, or at the start of FP2 yesterday, at turn 5 for Miller, it's been a real strong weekend for the Australians. Best qualifying in 9 Grand Prix since his front row start, the Japanese Grand Prix in Motegi last October. And he needs a big result this weekend, does Miller. Not scored a single point in the last 2 rounds. And of course, all the senior KTM management are here this weekend, including the big boss, Stefan Piera. So Miller leads the Piera Mobility Group charge from the middle of the 2nd row.
And of course, he led the Tissot sprint here 1 year ago. Miguel Oliveira led the full-length Grand Prix briefly at the start of last year before he was taken out by this man, Marc Marquez. Marquez firmly a contender here. In many respects, he's out of position on the grid for the potential he's shown through the weekend. He was regularly in the top 3 in practice yesterday afternoon, and probably felt he was in a front row, or at worst 2nd row potential challenge in qualifying this morning. But a high-speed get-off through turn 15. There are very few slower crashes around this Portimao circuit than the one Marc Marquez had this morning. The main relief is he's okay, but the consequence of it is that he's got to come from the middle of the 3rd row this afternoon and tomorrow.
He was shifting, no question. 4th gear, that crash coming through turn 14. It was a scary one. And you could see he was really angry, Marc Marquez. He knew it was a big waste opportunity. He fancied a proper pop at the front row ahead of this 12-lap Tissot sprint. As the beast then filters out of pit lane here in Portimao. Not a familiar position for him to come to the head of a MotoGP Grand Prix, or ahead of any grid, to be fair. The Italian has only ever had 11 poles in his Grand Prix career. This is his 172nd Grand Prix starts. Aside from last year with the injury misery with the collision with Luca Marini, which effectively ended his World Championship hopes before we'd even had a full Grand Prix 1 year ago in Portimao. Let's not forget, he does like Portimao. 2020 Moto2 World Champion. He lifted the big prize here 4 years ago. As we're on board the sighting lap then with Marc Marquez, it should be pretty explosive, shouldn't it, to see what Acosta and Marc Marquez and Fabio Quartararo as well adding into the mix. That is some third row of the grid, isn't it? Acosta, Marc Marquez and Fabio Quartararo. Some small light at the end of what's been a relatively dark tunnel of Lake Lewis for Yamaha. Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins directly through into Q2 at the end of play yesterday. First time two Yamahas have contested Q2 since Argentina nearly a full calendar year ago. Quartararo 9th and Alex Rins 11th, so some possible signs of shoots of recovery.
And they've got to try and take all the positives where they can get them, because Qatar was very short on them. For the factory Yamaha team, they were in a completely different race to the European manufacturers up ahead of them, and they've looked on the pace right from the start of the weekend here, albeit yesterday morning's session wasn't particularly representative given the conditions that we started the weekend with. But throughout yesterday's session and all of today, Quartararo has been in and around the top 6 during the practice sessions. Once again, it's just the outright time attack pace that Yamaha lack to put them in the mix. Quartararo often says, just put me on the front 2 rows and I can take it from there. He's going to have to go from the 3rd row of the grid, but you get the feeling that Quartararo and Rins, not only do they get on, but they're pushing each other on.
Yeah, coming into this Portimao battle, he 13 times the last 21. He qualified outside the top 10. Joan Mears in a moment on the sighting lap. Whoa, big slide, lost the rear, didn't he? Maybe just on that cold right-hand side of the tyre. That was going through turn 7. He was almost launched towards the moon there, wasn't he, Mia? That was a real scare on the side lap. We have to say, if you're a Honda fan watching at home, you might want to just either turn the volume down or put your fingers in your ears for about 20 seconds or so, because it has been a horror show so far here in Portimao for HRC. Johann Zarco leads their challenge, 19th on the grid. The 4 Hondas, the bottom 4 places on the grid, Zarco, Mir, Nakagami and Luca Marini, having a tough time. Marini actually was almost a full 4/10 of a second away from Nakagami in that second to last position. So Honda, their pretty torrid start to 2024 has rolled on, unfortunately, into the rolling hills of Portimao.
A sobering weekend, it's certainly safe to say, for Honda. Taka Nakagami used the word unstable to describe their bike yesterday, and he was the quickest of them yesterday.
So we know that Enea Bastianini fighting for his future inside that factory Ducati garage. Very early days, but a pole position in round 2 will do his chances of keeping his seat no harm. Brilliant performance this morning in Q2 by the Beast. And what can the world champ do from the second round? Let's get some pre-sprint thoughts of their boss, Davide Tardozzi, with Simon. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah, good afternoon, Davide. Fairy tale ending, you know, part of the story. Last 12 months for Enea, now back on pole. Give us your thoughts of Enea and Pecco going into this one.
Yeah, I think that both riders are very focused to be on the podium this race, but mainly Enea come back to the usual performance that he had in 2022. So he suffered a lot in 2023, but now he's really back, and I hope that today he can fight for the podium.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Davide Tardozzi. It's just fantastic, isn't it, to see Enea Bastianini getting back to his brilliant best as we look at the grid for this 12-lap sprint.
Bastianini, Viñales, Martin, your front row. Bagnaia, Millet, Bezzecchi, your second row. Return to form of sorts for Marco Bezzecchi. Every rider in the top 8, as you can see. Hard front, soft rear tyres, which is taking us down to Acosta and Marc Marquez. Fabio Quartararo has gone for medium tyres on row 3. Brad Binder starts 10th after a crash in qualifying. Alex Rins on the medium front starts 11th from Alex Marquez. Aleix Espargaro paying the price of being plummeted into Q1 yesterday. He starts 13th ahead of Fabio Gianantonio and Miguel Oliveira. Raul Fernandez, Frankie Morbidelli and Augusto Fernandez are on row 6. Completing your grid is the quartet of Hondas led by Johann Zarco.
Well, yesterday it was an excellent Friday, wasn't it, for Marc Marquez? In the tricky conditions in the opening practice, he was fastest third. Overall, yesterday, at the end of the hour-long practice session, a slightly tougher Saturday, I think it's fair to say. He goes from 8th on the grid after a couple of crashes so far this weekend. Let's get some thoughts of his boss, Michele Massini, before this sprint. Down to you, Simon.
Yes, Michele, I really want to ask you about Marc's performance this weekend. It looks like a step up. He's found another level, and apart from that crash, you know, that kind of looked like it put him back on the grid. His race pace looks as fast as anyone. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. Really happy about the pace, about all the weekend. Unluckily, we missed the first 2 rows for the qualifying, but can happen. So now really focused on the 2 sprint and races. But I hope the sprint will be difficult. But I think that for tomorrow we can make a step.
One more question before we let you go. If you watch the replay of Mark's crash, it looks like the back sits down, like the right device activates too early, you know, taking the weight off the front. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think that something happened on the rear because at the end he leaned too much and losing the front. But there is small things that we need to already adjust, but need some little time to avoid this. But anyway, now we'll focus on the sprint.
Thank you, and good luck with both the Marquez brothers today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Michele Massini. Life is a beach, isn't it, for some lucky folks? Enjoying the coastal walks here on what is a beautiful, stunning Algarve coastline. But those fans have chosen horsepower over seaside, haven't they? And I think they've made the right decision as they come to see this man, Miguel Oliveira. We have to say it's been a rather stumbling and stuttering start, hasn't it, to 2024? We thought the upgrade to the factory Aprilia was going to really galvanise Miguel Oliveira, but it has been quite a difficult start so far to this new season and part of the new project at Trackhouse Racing. Let's go and get some more thoughts from KTM Motorsport Director Pit Barr. I'm sure he was happy to see Jack Miller getting back to his best fit this morning. The rookie again, Pedro Acosta, so close to the top 6, and you know Brad Binder is going to put up a mighty fight coming from 10th on the grid. Let's hear from Pit down on the grid with Simon.
Yes, I'd love Pit's thoughts on a few different things. I mean, I'm super happy, you must be, to see Jack back where we know he belongs. Brad, again, alongside Marc Marquez, the race pace of Brad looks fantastic. Such a shame he had to fall and put himself so far back on the grid. And Pedro, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to agree. I mean, so happy that Jack is where he should be, 2nd row. Then Pedro is just doing amazing things. I mean, what he did with his motorcycle already the last 2 days is amazing, because this is a tricky track. I mean, not easy. Coming here first time with a MotoGP bike and just hammering this thing downhill, right corner into the start straight. He's the only one touching the ground with our fairing because he goes faster than anybody else. It's pretty crazy. It's a shame for Brad because he had a good plan for qualifying. He was super fast first sector, like more than a tenth faster than pole, but crashed. And then the second bike was not on the same level. Wrong front tire, wrong rear tire, left. So he had to do the best out of it. But yeah, it's a shame because it will be difficult from that far back. But we know what Brad can do from any start position. So let's just support him.
Thank you. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Pit Barra. 3 of the Piero Mobility Group motorcycles inside that top 10. Should be explosive watching the likes of Acosta, Marquez and Quartararo come from row 3. Brad Binder, of course, heading that 4th row. We just saw there, didn't we, Fabio Quartararo? Already, after round 1, lots of talk and speculation and gossip about where he might be in 2025. It looks like it might be destination Aprilia unless Yamaha can have a dramatic quick turnaround of their fortunes. Good to see. There's always pockets of Miller fans wherever you go in the world, aren't they? Making the long trip from Australia. Jack gets ready to fire the RC16 away from 5th place on the grid. As you mentioned, it's a beautiful part of South Europe, this part of Portugal, the Algarve coast. A golfer's paradise, a surfer's paradise. Nice for a bit of fishing as well. And they love their motorsport as well in this part of the world. Well, they're sport mad nation, aren't they? Of course, Miguel Oliveira's popularity only 2nd really to football legend and football global icon Cristiano Ronaldo. And speaking of Portuguese football legends, tomorrow at the end of the full feature 25 lap race, the special one, none other than Jose Mourinho, of course, found winning trophies very much to his liking in the English Premier League at Chelsea for many, many years. He's won trophies pretty much in every country that he's managed. Famously managed Porto here in Portugal, and great to see the special one will be waving the checker flag to some very special MotoGP riders tomorrow.
Yeah, he'll be the most special of them all tomorrow afternoon, who will be doing a Jose-style run up the touchline at the end of 12 laps of the Tissot sprint. Pecco Bagnaia gets himself in the zone. He has his teammate immediately ahead of him, who starts from a rare pole position. Bastianini, Maverick Vinales on the front row for the second time in the last 3 Grand Prix, of course. Casting your minds back to Valencia last year. He will look to fly the Aprilia flag with the next of them here. Aleix Espargaro back in 13th. The rider I think to watch at the start is Jack Miller on the KTM. Remember how quick the KTMs were off the line in Qatar 2 weeks ago. Both Miller and Binder launched off the line. If Miller can do something similar, he'll be right in the middle of the action going down to turn 1.
There goes the BMW safety car then, peeling away at the front of the grid. The countdown well and truly underway then to our second Tissot sprint of the 2024 MotoGP World Championship. It's a familiar position at the top of the championship as far as Pecco Bagnaia goes. It's a position of authority he's become very accustomed to, isn't it? Jorge Martin then, going in search of an 11th heaven maybe. Does an 11th Tissot sprint win beckon in the next 20 minutes or so? He starts from the back of that front row of the grid, middle of the front row, second place on the grid, second place in the Grand Prix here 1 year ago. And it's great to see him firing on all cylinders, great to see him fully fit and getting back to his brilliant best. Enea Bastianini on pole position in MotoGP for just the second time. He pals away from pole in Portimao.